early on, as I had began to start preaching, and at the time, my first cousin Joe Mead was the minister there, and I was his associate, and he called me one Saturday night at about 11 o'clock at night, and he said, I'm feeling sick, my throat's scratchy, and I don't know if I'll be able to preach tomorrow. Do you think you could preach tomorrow? And I said, sure. He said, well, I don't want to put any pressure on you. I know it's last minute. He said, but I'll preach if you can't, so don't worry about it. But if you can, then you can go ahead, but we'll talk about it in the morning. And I said, okay. And we got off the phone, and I began to pray and say, Lord, what do I need to preach? What would you have me say tomorrow? And I started to study, and I was floating around 3 different topics and praying about it and wanting to know. Well, one topic was just so strong to me to study that topic, and I began to study that topic. I just read a book, and I thought, I'll use a passage from that book to illustrate this point. And as I began to write down some verses and some notes about that topic, I was excited. I went on to bed the next day, got up, got ready, and went to church. And my first cousin Joe, he came, he said, you going to preach this morning, or am I? And I said, well, I can. He said, well, go ahead. He said, I've got my notes here. I could preach if I needed to, but I just soon not have to because I don't feel good. And I said, okay, I'll preach this morning. And I preached that message that morning, and after service, after the preaching, I generally went back to the back, and as people come out, you shake hands with them and talk to them. Well, that day it was kind of interrupted, and my attention was God, and this lady said, you need to come here. My son, he was crying, and I thought him and his sister had gotten in a fight, and I asked him what was wrong, and he said, I need to be baptized. I need to make Jesus Lord of my life. And I said, well, okay. But right before she came, my cousin said, I got to tell you something. And then that happened. He said, well, we'll talk about that later. Let's go get this taken care of right now. So we went, and the young man, I believe he was 10 years old, he said, yeah, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. We baptized him, and all that were still there rejoiced. And my cousin then came to me, and he said, I want to talk to you. I want to show you something. He gave me his sermon notes, one sheet of paper, just like mine was. He said, I want you to look at that. The topic of my sermon was love. The topic of his sermon was love. And you can look at those sermons, verse by verse, note by note, and compare them, and they were identical. He said, you know what? He said, I believe the Lord wanted that sermon preached here today, and I think we just saw the results of why. So God loves you. He wants you to become a Christian. He wants to save you from death. If you need Jesus in your life, we'd be happy to assist you with that, help you to build a relationship with Him. Why don't you come be with us at the Herald Church of Christ as soon as possible. But until then, keep looking to Jesus as the author and finisher of our faith.